Good afternoon, everyone. Warm welcome to our knowledge series webinar. We will be starting in a few minutes. While we wait for others to join, I can see that people are still joining. Good afternoon, everyone. Those of you who joined just now, we'll just give it a minute more and then we will get started. A warm welcome once again. So while we are waiting for some more people to join, I'd like to initiate a quick poll. I know that 2020 has been a very tough year for all of us. We'd just like to get your feedback on your experience of what have been the major procurement challenges very specifically. So I'm launching this poll now. Request all of you to please share your thoughts. So request the audience to please participate in the poll. I hope you can see the poll now and you should be able to start casting your votes. What have been the major procurement challenges for you in the recent past? I see that some more people have joined just now. So those of you who joined just now, if you could just share your thoughts on this poll, which is displayed on the screen, what have been your major procurement challenges in the year gone by? Yeah, that's good. 70% have voted. We'll just give a little more time. So those of you who joined just now, I see that quite a few people have just joined. Request you to please vote on your major procurement challenges. I'll close the poll in just a few seconds more, so it would be great if you could actually cast your vote. Thank you. I am closing the poll now. Thanks everyone for participating. I will share the results now just so that we can have a context before we start the session. Not surprisingly, productivity due to remote working and supplier risk management and supplier challenges seem to be on the top of everybody's mind. Thanks to everybody for voting. Fantastic, response. It is quite matching with what we have been hearing from many of our other interactions across the world. Of course, cost management as a challenge is not going to go away. It is very much there. And contract enforcement and product innovation are not major challenges for a majority of you, but 11% each have said that. So thank you so much. And if I will get started with the session now, thank you very much. Thanks for participating in the poll. And I will start with a quick introduction of the topic of the day. Today, we are going to be talking about how we can maximize savings for using digitization in direct material purchasing. Okay, so the topic is very, very specific to direct material purchasing, and I look forward to a very, very interesting discussion with my colleague Suresh. Coming to Suresh, Suresh is our Chief Solutions Architect. He's got more than 2 decades of experience providing complex enterprise solutions to global customers. He's executed projects in over 34 countries across the world and has vast expertise, especially in this area of manufacturing, supply chain, and providing complex solutions which address everyday challenges of your businesses. My name is Kumar Mallampalli. I am a co-founder of RheinBrücke, and I also am very passionate about this, specifically this area, strategic sourcing. I have experience across automotive, general manufacturing, and airlines over the last 3 decades, and I will be your moderator today. Suresh, a big welcome, and thank you so much for being, taking part in this session today. To set the context for our audience and to get started, and get the conversation rolling, could you just tell us what is so unique or so peculiar or complex about direct material purchasing in vis-a-vis indirect procurement? This will set the context, and then we can get started into more further like other topics around the same area.
Hey, thanks, Kumar, and once again, welcome all of you to this event. And if you look at it, that this is one of the confusion many of the people have it, Kumar, when you talk about what is direct procurement versus indirect procurement. Though we know at a very high level, at the end of the day, it is important for us to set the stage proper for having a fruitful event actually today, right? Direct procurement is all about spending on services, goods, materials that really drive profit of an organization, performance, or competitive advantage, right? Because that is typically, if you take a P&L, a profit and loss income statement, it is mainly contributing to the above the gross margin, right? It's basically for the products what we are producing, the raw materials which you are buying, and other support items actually what is required for doing such things, right? But when it comes to indirect procurement, it's all about expenditure on the maintenance, goods, and services needed for running the day-to-day operations, right? Which is not directly contributing to the company's bottom line, right? So that is where the difference between the direct and indirect procurement. So as I said earlier, the direct procurement is all about something which is contributing, so something which is required to drive the profit of an organization, as well as the competitive performance and competitive advantage of an organization. Now, when we talk about direct procurement and indirect procurement, the challenges are completely different, right? If you want to make the direct procurement more effective, it is important for you to have more collaboration with your supplier, because suppliers are playing a very larger role when it comes to direct procurement, right? And it is important for you to get the best of the best price for your commodities, materials, what you're buying to make your product more competitive. At the same time, the indirect procurement, if you look at the ratio, right, the total expenditure versus indirect procurement versus direct procurement, almost 50 to 60% of your cost is from a direct procurement, and remaining, let's say 15 to 25% is more of indirect procurement, right? And it may vary from industry to industry, especially for manufacturing industry, trading industry, those kind of areas. The ratio may be, the direct procurement ratio may be slightly higher. So to manage that direct procurement more effective, it is important for you to have, as I said, the supplier management, supplier relationship very strong, right? They are a strong partner in our overall performance. It is important for us to have a proper policy and mechanism to manage our inventory, right? It is important to know what inventory levels to be maintained, because the more and more inventory is going to block our working capital and we will have more challenge. At the same time, if you don't have adequate inventory, we will not be able to deliver goods actually on time to our customers, right? We always have the challenge. It is more of a chicken and egg story in terms of what inventory level to be maintained, and if you maintain more, what's going to happen, right? The next important aspect is basically the organization structure, where the direct procurement, the skill set required is completely different from the indirect procurement. The direct procurement, we may probably have much more details captured from the suppliers, especially let's say that actually I'm buying certain raw materials, right? And when I buy that raw material, I may ask the supplier to give me the details in terms of the cost breakdown, especially how much they manufacture and what is the process they do for manufacturing, how much is the machine time, and what materials do they use actually, what's the cost of the materials, right? And all of the details in terms of getting to know more details about their cost structure and what kind of pricing policies they have. Is it cost plus or markup based? That kind of details as well. So this is all about having the strategic procurement as a concept, right? Traditionally, people have been buying things just based on price. People have been doing these days more of a strategic in nature in terms of getting the details from the suppliers. So I know I can easily compare why the supplier cost is higher and why the other supplier cost is lower, right? So I can very easily compare, take a conscious decision in terms of a long-term relationship, right? So the direct procurement as such has got more complexity. So the level of knowledge required for people who deal with direct procurement is much higher compared to indirect procurement, right? So the direct procurement, as I said, every cent you are saving in the direct procurement is going to definitely add to your bottom line, and it will also make you to drive your help you to drive your revenue growth, because the price is lower. Naturally, you will be able to sell more and you will be able to be more competitive in the market. So the direct procurement, every penny you are saving on the direct procurement is going to help you in a big time when it comes to the overall procurement.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. So thanks, Suresh. That sets the context. This session is not about looking back, right? This session is about what are we going to do moving forward, 2021 onwards. So could you please talk about the overall focus areas? Where should buyers be focusing on? Procurement departments, what are they going to be looking at in the coming months and quarters?
Sure. There is a subsequent shift in the focus these days, right? As you rightly said, not going back and looking at actually what went wrong. It's all about making sure that actually we are able to take a proactive decision and respond to the market rather than reacting to the situation, right? As I said, there's a subsequent shift in the overall focus areas. Actually, it is not purely because of COVID, the pandemic alone, right? And the biggest difference today is basically, though we had similar issues in the past, I would say the tsunami in Japan and the flood in Thailand or the volcano eruption in Iceland. The difference between those incidents versus today, the pandemic was almost hit across the globe, and I would say that actually there is nothing left untouched, right? Because no area which is untouched. It's completely got affected everywhere. But the other areas were more in pockets. Actually, regionally there was impact, but in some areas, actually, let's say the tsunami in Japan definitely affected the automotive industry across the globe. But some of the other things, actually, it was more in a pocket. At least people have option to go and look at that, right? So this pandemic has literally kind of created a lot of disruption across the globe. So people started looking at actually, what do we need to do more, or what is typically happening, right? If you look at certain statistics, almost 47% of the customers, they say they lack visibility to supplier capacity, right? Without knowing the capacity of a supplier, I keep placing more and more orders. So naturally, it affects their delivery, it increases the lead time, and bad customer experience, so on and so forth. But at the same time, from a supplier point of view, they keep saying almost 37% suppliers actually lack visibility at customer demand. So without having proper demand visibility, how am I going to plan my kind of production and my delivery, so on and so forth? And many organizations, what they are doing is to come out of this crisis too. I always want to be safe, right? So almost 55% organizations use inventory buffer to manage this kind of disruptions actually. And definitely we know the flip side of that is it is going to create a lot of cash. We will have a working capital, we will block in terms of buying that inventory and keeping it. So these are all some challenges in the industry today. People have looked at those things, plus pandemic and other issues, and they have changed the focus in terms of what they have been doing before versus what they are doing today. And there is an interesting survey being done by APQC, and what they are saying is 81% of the people who have participated in that survey is saying supply chain planning is key. And it is directly connected to what I said a couple of minutes back in terms of visibility, right? Because unless and until I have proper visibility, how am I going to plan my manufacturing, right? From a supplier perspective, without having a proper visibility on my demand as a customer, how am I going to let the supplier know what is required for me? So the visibility across the value chain is very important actually. Once we have the visibility and we have the right tools, we will be able to do better supply chain planning, right? That is very important. The next important point, if you look at it, it is sourcing and procurement, right? It is sourcing right suppliers actually, and it's very important to say sourcing right suppliers, right? Because for that we need to know the risk, we need to know what is the issue, what dependency do we have, so on and so forth, right? And another area is innovation. And when it comes to innovation, and it's all about using latest tools and techniques available, the technology available to support such things actually. Innovation, co-innovation with the suppliers, using the right technology to support the procurement process, right? Or the supply chain planning process. When we talk about tools like AI, RPA, so on and so forth, right? These days we are not lack of tools. The question is all about how effectively we are using that is the question, right? So once we can use that in the right application, we will definitely start getting the benefits. And logistics is something which everybody is aware of it. During the pandemic, the lockdown, it's been most of the flights, air cargo has been grounded. The transportation had a huge issue. The people have been literally struggling in terms of, though they have the material, it is how difficult it is to transport that to one location to other location, right? This has created a lot of change in the thought process. People have been thinking about more from a regionalization, having regional hub rather than moving away from a global structure, right? So that is something very important. And needless to say, manufacturing, product development, order management, all of them have its own priorities, focuses. But these are the four important areas where the organization have been focusing, and especially the focus areas these days when it comes to the different organizations.
Sure, absolutely, Suresh, and I think it resonates well with even the poll that we did earlier. So a lot of people responded that supplier risk and supplier planning is, a big challenge for them. So let's maybe drill down a little bit on, how can companies maintain continuity of their supplies? What strategies can they adopt moving forward? Because we've learned a lot of lessons in the last 12 months. How can we apply them in a more intelligent way, Suresh?
Correct, Kumar. This is very well, as you said. The survey results also, it is very well aligned to what the topic we are going to discuss, right? Many organizations have been struggling in terms of due to the supplier risk, right? And when we talk about the supplier risk management, the risk could be due to several reasons, right? The risk could be due to this kind of a pandemic and where our majority of the suppliers are located, right? It could be due to the inaccurate internal need analysis, because sometimes what happens is basically an overstatement of or understatement of need, unrealistic timescales, and poorly designed requirement, all could cause to some sort of risk actually, right? Poor vendor selection, because sometimes what happens is most of our vendors are located in one region, right? And that region has got an issue, similar like the tsunami in Japan or the flood in Thailand, right? That could be another issue. And or you can say that actually a use of real-time data for decision making, because unless and until I have the right tools, I have the real tools to take decisions real time, it is not going to help me in terms of managing my overall requirement in a volatile environment, right? Especially during this pandemic, people were really not able to predict how long it's going to last and when is it going to end, right? And there's a lot of ambiguity in the market actually. So it is very difficult to forecast things. It's very difficult to communicate effectively with proper demands and so on and so forth. So risk is very, very important. Now, when we talk about risk, we need to have proper risk management tools, right? Because how are we going to identify the risk actually, and what kind of tools and techniques do we have it? It calls for a real need of a proper supplier performance management capability, and based on different attributes actually, how are we going to set the weightage, how the system is going to give us necessary inputs in terms of identifying a risk, and how are we going to manage it actually, so on and so forth, right? Because when we talk about risk can be classified in different ways, right? There is a manageable risk, manageable surprises. That is more about actually, it's very difficult to anticipate because it is a surprise, right? But it can be managed actually in terms of impact, because for an example, actually localized conflict in a country like flood in Thailand kind of stuff, or some other civil war or any other issues, right? But what we can do is we can very well manage that by diversifying the operations, having dual sourcing mechanisms, actually not really sticking to one supplier, how multiple source of suppliers spread across the globe. So that can be managed in that ways. There can be another kind of risk, which is more of black swans, right? It's been called black swans because it is hard to anticipate, but it's severe in terms of impact, right? Kind of pandemic, right? We cannot anticipate it. It's all of a sudden it came in, right? Natural disasters, it's very difficult to predict, very difficult to anticipate. But what we can do is basically, we need to have, our process needs to be more agile. We need to have more agility and flexibility in terms of managing such things. And it is important to have a healthy reserve of parts, right? The inventory. And that is always, it is more of a double-edged sword, right? If you maintain too much of inventory, it is an issue. If you don't maintain inventory, it is an issue. It is important to have the right balance. That is where the tools help us in terms of identifying such things. Scenario planning, risk transfer methods. These are all the techniques which will help us in terms of managing the risk which is associated in the category of black swans. Now, the third type of risk could be more of brewing storms, right? It can be anticipated and it will have a high impact once they materialize. So what can we do to manage such things? It is more about the redefined sourcing strategies. We need to have inventory build-up strategies to be managed. The prepare for change in demand. These could be the different mechanisms to manage such things. So in summary, inventory or supply risk management is very key. That can be done only with proper tools and proper technology, right? It is very important these days. The big data and other things are part of it. AI, these can help us in terms of identifying risk well in advance, and we can have a proper risk register and risk mitigating techniques and mechanisms, right? Ensuring continuity of supply, it is more about actually, as I said, visibility is key, managing risk is key, and proper forecasting techniques are key. Once we have all these things, actually, we can ensure that once we have the right set of suppliers, which is diversified in nature, we will be able to ensure a continuity of supply actually, and that will help us the entire supply chain healthy, and we can avoid disruption as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think tracing at least up to tier 3 suppliers just to make sure that there is enough redundancy down the supplier tiers is also part of something a tool can help much more. Doing it manually could probably be not even possible in some instances. Absolutely. One request to the audience, please put your questions across in the questions panel that you're seeing. Please post your questions anytime when you have something. We will take all questions together at the end. So, Suresh, we come to the next topic, right? Supply chain planning is definitely going to protect you, but then you have to be able to successfully translate that into sourcing and procurement actions, right? Because you can plan all you like, but if you cannot translate that into sourcing and procurement activities on time and at the right quality at the right cost, it's not going to help the organization move forward. So could you share, what would be the priorities for sourcing and procurement moving forward?
Absolutely, Kumar. First of all, it is important to look at a survey being done by Gartner, right? Almost out of the survey, what they're finding is basically only 1 in 5 companies, almost around 21%, think that they have a highly resilient supply chain network, right? Because that is an eye-opener. Because people are accepting that actually their supplier network is not resilient, right? Their process is not resilient. And it is always a big risk in terms of managing the proper sourcing and procurement. Actually, when we talk about sourcing and procurement, supply chain visibility is one of the key things, because as long as we have the visibility, right? Because there can be situations like the pandemic where it is very difficult for us to forecast things properly. But always, as long as we have a process in place, we have partners in place with the supplier. It's more of a strategic partnership rather than need-based procurement. It is easy for us to communicate and work closely, so we will be able to manage the situation to a great extent, right? So rather than operating in silos, it is important for us to work closely and have visibility. There is an interesting statistics available, right? Now, during the pandemic, what people have found is basically almost the vast majority of the Fortune 1000 companies was sourcing supplies from the capital of China, Hubei province, right? And interestingly, more than 200 of the Fortune Global 500 firms had a presence directly in Wuhan. And if you look at some Deloitte study, almost 160 of Fortune 1000 companies, they have their tier 1 suppliers in that area. Almost 938 customers, they have their tier 2 suppliers in that area, right? So interestingly, what happens is basically people were never thought of diversifying suppliers, right? So that is one important thing people have started thinking about. Now, as I said earlier, from a globalization to regionalization, a move, right? A transformation, especially people have been buying. They had a lot of dependency in certain pockets, especially in China, right? And especially in the area of Wuhan. And that dependency has created a lot of issues. And unfortunately, many organizations, they were looking at only their tier 1 suppliers. They were not looking at their tier 2 suppliers. Their tier 2 suppliers were sourcing materials. Though they were based out of different part of the world, they were sourcing from the same area, from Wuhan, right? So though we had a visibility to tier 1 suppliers, their tier 2 as well as their sub-suppliers, the supplier who supplies to their manufacturers, were out of Wuhan, and though their suppliers, they had a diversification strategy, unfortunately their supplier didn't have it, which caused a lot of disruption and a chaotic situation, right? So these days, what is important is people are started asking about much more visibility in terms of how you are doing things and where do you have presence, at the same time your suppliers and the details. And the more and more transparency and visibility we can provide, you can be much better prepared to compete in the market. So it is very important to have that visibility. Visibility is key these days, actually. Now, as I said, from a globalization to regionalization, is more of diversifying, consolidating supplier base, right? That's a lot of issues, actually. And these days, what people have been thinking is regional hubs for procurement. Let's say that actually if I have an entity manufacturing facility in China, let me source it from a Chinese entity. If I have something in, let's say, Europe, let them have a Euro-based supply hub, so I don't have much of an issue, right? So if people started thinking about more of regionalization rather than globalization, that is something which is a huge change when it comes to that. The next important aspect is basically supplier relationship-based sourcing. As I said earlier, it's all about actually the kind of relationship we have it to effectively do strategic procurement, right? Because it's more of a partners rather than customer-vendor relationship. Visibility is being provided, relationship is there, easily we can communicate, effective communication can be established. And needless to say, for all these things to be made effective, you need to have proper tools and techniques, right? And the other important aspect is basically what kind of analytics and decision-making tools do we have in terms of taking actions in a proactive manner, right? Because as I said, we should not react, we should respond to the situation, right? So proper analytical tools, all sort of spend analysis, risk analysis, and all sort of details and decision-making tools should be available in the system. And the next important thing is basically the process itself, right? The process should be agile. It should be much more resilient, right? So what we can do is following best practices in the procurement supply chain itself is going to help in terms of forecasting, in terms of doing events and getting pricing, right? How we work with the supplier. The best practice is key. And the question is basically, how do we know that we have the best practices? That is by having the right product, right tool for you to manage the whole procurement, right? Because most of the industry best products supports the best practice in the industry, and you will be able to implement that actually and make use of it, right? The sourcing and procurement is very key, and that is something really helps us in terms of managing the situation, and especially during the time which we can't predict much, right?
Yep, absolutely, Suresh. In fact, we will. I have some follow-up questions in this area, especially now that you have set the context. Probably we'll talk a little more. But before we go to the actual digitization part, maybe a couple of quick minutes on product development. I know you already touched upon it in about 10 minutes ago, but maybe a couple of minutes just to give a idea about how this can be expedited for using tools and techniques.
Correct. Kumar, this is more to do with organizations, especially, let us say, the manufacturing organization, right? Services-based organizations, where they have the entire product life cycle to be managed, right, from conceptualization, right? During the conceptualization, the big challenge is basically many of the parts are not available in the market readily. It requires a lot of alternative substitutes to be identified. You don't know the cost of such things. Actually, it is important for you to link this with the sourcing and your buyers to source right suppliers for supporting that. And this is one of the area where you can think about co-innovation, right? Because that is an interesting topic, especially some of the items when it is unique. You develop certain suppliers, especially suppliers where you have strategic relationship, right? Co-innovate such components, which raw materials, which products there, and that in turn helps you to negotiate and get a better price and have a long-term relationship as well, right? So co-innovation is it's going to offer you a lot of benefits, but at the same time, during the entire life cycle, let's say the product development doesn't happen overnight, right? It takes its own sweet time. It's more of a project. It's more of a project has different stages, and you keep refining your way of manufacturing, the way the materials are being used, right? There are PDM, PLM kind of tools involved. There are a lot of process testing tools involved. So at different stages, when we have this kind of product development, how do we easily communicate that to the procurement team in terms of them getting the right suppliers at the right place? So I will be able to have a should-be cost calculated automatically, right? And how quickly we can do that. So how do I know I'm going to be competitive in the market when I'm introducing a product, right? If I'm not able to offer the right price to the market, how am I going to launch this to the market, right? Because pricing is one of the key criteria these days. Although we say that it's all about value, not about price alone, because for determine the value, price is a key attributes, right? So we have to be price sensitive. At the same time, it is important for us to know at different stages how it is being done. And what other important thing required is basically it's more of collaboration, right? What kind of tools do we have in terms of collaborate, right? Real-time collaboration is required with vendors. Real-time collaboration is required with the R&D team. Collaboration is required by different stakeholders in the organization. So proper visibility is being provided, right? So at the same time, we should not be compromising on the customer satisfaction, customer experience, right? Because most of the organization, one of the key focus is basically how to develop, how to improve customer experience actually and customer satisfaction. Without compromising on that, how quickly I can develop a product at the same time, how quickly I can source the materials required for that at the best price, in the form of an co-innovation or identifying the right suppliers or alternative or substitute products, because these are all interdependent and very important when it comes to product development as a function, right? So
yeah, absolutely. In fact, engineering teams getting direct visibility so that they can source the right prototype parts can make a huge difference in long-term value engineering, right? Absolutely interesting point. And last but not least, just wanted maybe a very quick touch on innovation, because a lot of things are happening and it is accelerating as well. And procurement teams obviously have to meet all these demands which are coming from all directions. In automotive, for example, electric is totally changing the way sourcing is happening, and the number of parts that are being sourced are fewer, but there are more shortages. So if you could just touch upon product innovation, where technology is heading in terms of innovation from a tools perspective, that will be nice.
Correct. See, it has got a large role to play in making sourcing and procurement more effective, right? Innovation in the way of not only technology, the processes, right? What helps us to get best price from the market, or rather best value from the market? It's a mistake from my side to say what price from the market. It's more of what value from the market, right?
True.
It is important to say how innovative our process can be to make it more agile, more flexible, more resilient, right? It is important for us to look at it actually, how quickly we can react to the situation, how the tools and techniques helps us in terms of doing that, right? How quickly we can do the spend analysis, spend management, and savings reporting, so on and so forth, right? At the same time, it is also important for us to look at more of the technology side, how we can make it more efficient and enable all these things, enable people to leverage from what we have and take quick decisions actually, and we can be more proactive in terms of decision making, right? Tools like artificial intelligence helps us to identify risk well in advance, right? Helps us to predict things actually, helps us to let's say do what if cases, what if scenarios, right? When we talk about supply chain planning, when we talk about the risk management, all these areas, the AI can be a big help. At the same time, RPAs, right? Many of the repeated tasks can be automated rather than people sitting and doing it. There's an interesting study we have done, Kumar, I think a couple of months back, hope you remember. It's more about a return on investment in terms of having such a proper tool, right? It was really surprising the amount of time people are spending in a small organization in terms of simple tasks like purchase order creation, RFQ creation, so on and so forth, right? Many of the tasks can be automated with the help of RPAs. So the technology can very much help, or I can say we can leverage from the technology. We can consumerize those technologies to make it more meaningful and make it the process more effective actually, right? So innovation has got a larger role to play, moving away from a traditional price-based procurement to more of a value-based strategic procurement itself is an innovation, right? You will be surprised to note that even large enterprises are not doing that, right? Because that is the sad story. It is unless you move away from a price-based traditional procurement to more value-based strategic procurement, where you have complete visibility and you will be able to bring down the cost drastically, right? That innovation cannot be achieved. So innovation in terms of technology, innovation in terms of processes, making it more agile, making it more responsive, more resilient. So that is what innovation is all about.
Yep, absolutely, Suresh, and it's accelerating, right? It's the innovation cycle is becoming fast and fast.
Yeah.
Of course, any discussion about procurement is not complete without cost reduction, right? Technology is going to help. Again, technology is also going to channel better tools into the hands of the buyers to ensure that they can play with cost better. They can leverage different aspects because they have greater visibility data. So, could you just connect the dots, between how technology and tools and techniques can actually help achieve a more long-term sustainable cost reduction?
Yeah, Kumar, it is a very important point. What we should not get confused is when we talk about cost reduction, it is not just the cost of material, right? It is also the cost internally what we incur to manage procurement, right? Cost reduction has got a huge meaning. When you look at, especially during the evolving economic climate, companies are facing increased pressure to cut costs to be more efficient, right? And more effective. At the same time, since procurement has a huge impact in profitability, organizations found it is easiest to start from the procurement, right? Because that is the best way to cut cost. And as I said, the process cost as well as the cost of material as well, or where we get better value, right? And there's a survey being done by Deloitte in 2016 with all the global chief procurement officers. And what it shows is basically almost 74% of CPOs are focusing on cost reduction as a strong business priority. Now, when we talk about cost reduction, it is two things. How do we, first of all, measure what cost reduction we are achieving, right? So it's important for us to do, first of all, proper spend management, spend cube, right? Where are we spending? How much are we spending? Once we have that visibility, we will be able to manage it better. It's always proper diagnosis is not there. How are we going to treat the problem, right? It's all about you cannot treat the patient, right? So it's all about doing proper spend analysis in terms of understanding how much are we spending, where are we spending, so on and so forth, right? And the next part of it actually more of savings analysis, right? When we say savings analysis, it's more of PPV and purchase price variance and having savings target about each and every buyer, each and every category, right? And how do we measure it actually? Have a budget standard price against each commodity or each part number, and against that actually we want to measure each buyer how much he is contributing to the savings target. And we may have a different target in different commodities, right? Some of the commodities, it is not something where we don't have much flexibility, right? Because our customers are enforcing us to buy from certain suppliers actually, where we may not have much flexibility in terms of savings. But with the suppliers where you have alternative, right? Because you have a bigger opportunity for improving savings, right? And the more and more savings you are to the kitty, and your cost is naturally going to go down, right? So that is very important. At the same time, the spend analysis, saving analysis is all very important. And another important aspect is basically, it's all about moving away from traditional procurement to strategic procurement, because the strategic procurement really helps in terms of getting things better and getting a better value from the customer, a supplier. The next important aspect is basically started negotiating long-term supply agreements, right? And when you negotiate a long-term supply agreement, it's important for you to provide visibility. At the same time, you can force the suppliers to offer you price reduction year over year. And that really helps you in terms of predicting what is going to be the cost and negotiating further with the suppliers, right? And to get a better price. And leverage suppliers is another important thing, because there are certain commodities, certain categories, there is no supplier monopoly. It is more about you have multiple sources in terms of getting things from the same material. So what you need to do is use the supplier network, do proper research in terms of coming out with alternative suppliers and build competition in the market, then you agree and work with one strategic partner rather than working with everybody, right? First, you have visibility. Once you have visibility, you can negotiate better. You can leverage the suppliers available in the market. Now, the other aspect, the other important thing is basically think about more just in time, with the better inventory management, better planning, right? So strategic procurement, supplier relationship management, spend analysis, savings analysis, and long-term contract. All these different things are going to help you in terms of better cost reduction or better value creation.
Absolutely, absolutely, Suresh. And I just thought, it will be important for us to probably connect the dots and come back to, tools and techniques and then technology to be able to successfully make it happen. So if you could just talk about digitization to connect all these dots and much more, right? Digitization can do even more, many more things as well. So could you just spend a few minutes?
I would say if you look at it, one of the area which is left unattended from a digitalization perspective was procurement, right? There was a survey which talks about almost 80% plus organizations are still dependent on spreadsheet actually in terms of managing their procurement. It's really surprising, right? But if you look at actually e-commerce, and from a sales point of view, many of the organizations started investing in CRMs and sales e-commerce solutions actually. And we also have found such organization was better enabled to manage the COVID kind of a situation, the pandemic kind of a situation, right? Because one of the survey results, what you have seen today, Kumar, the remote management is one of the biggest difficulty what people said. So that is where the digitization comes into the picture. Now, if you if you have a proper digitization when it comes to the procurement, the visibility can be provided. All the stakeholders holders can collaborate and work on a single platform. It is seamlessly integrated with your key system. So there is no data redundancy. There is no two-time data entry in the system. At the same time, we can manage the end-to-end functions in terms of the contract. Now, it is all about having contract, enforcing such contracts, getting full visibility about that contracts in terms of how much are we spending against that, how we can better negotiate with the suppliers, how the suppliers are performing against that contract. Because these days, every organization is evaluating their suppliers using a concept called SIFOT, right? SIFOT is nothing but supply in full on time. From a commerce sales side, people say DIFOT, delivery in full on time as well. So SIFOT is a key principle which people, KPI people use in terms of measuring, calculating performance against their suppliers actually, and what kind of sourcing events we can manage in terms of whether it is RFQ, RFIs, tenders, or you say that actually sourcing auctions. So all these events can be managed and you need to have tools. You cannot run with spreadsheets actually and get lost, right? And it's also important in terms of your savings management, PPV, or in other words, actually, how do you bomb analytics in terms of identifying should be cost, savings on a product over a period of time. So I know my procurement team is working hard in terms of managing such situations actually. How do we collaborate with the team in terms of suppliers to buyers, to different stakeholders in the organization, and needless to say, the relevance of commodity category management in terms of managing the end-to-end things. Yeah,
absolutely. I think a holistic view makes a big difference. Thank you, Suresh. And of course, I just wanted to encapsulate everything in one place. And what you have probably very quickly, since I see that we got a lot of questions, so I thought maybe a very quick summary on some of the problems that you stated and what was the solution, technology solution that can make it happen.
If you look at Kumar, the sourcing challenges are something which we have talked about already, right? It is not something new to any of the participants or any of us here. We have a huge challenge because of several reasons, right? Pandemic is only one of the reasons, but these problems are evolving over a period of time. It is not something people started identifying all these problems overnight, right? But what we need is basically a response to such problems, right? A proactive mechanism to manage such problems. That is what an end-to-end procurement tool which helps right from onboarding a supplier to manage the end-to-end spend analysis and savings analysis, and also to generate more value. It's a simple philosophy, right? As long as you are able to calculate your problem and your amount of return on investment by having a system, you know how much do you need to spend for resolving that problem, right? It's all about identifying problems, calculating the impact of such problems actually, and what in turn we can get by having a proper tools and techniques. And without having a proper tool to manage your end-to-end procurement, you will not be able to resolve such problems actually, right? And the solution is a tool like Merlin, and it's a proper procurement end-to-end tool.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Suresh. And before we move to the question answer session, I just thought we will do another quick survey based on what we've been speaking so far. I just want to understand, so we will just take 2 minutes, because I'd like to spend a few minutes asking Suresh the questions that you all have asked. So please, if you could just quickly respond to the poll, it'll be nice. "30 more seconds. It'll be great if you could respond. Okay, so yeah, I'm seeing that 50% of you have voted. Maybe, yeah, another 5 to 7 seconds, and then I will. Okay, thank you so much. I will share the poll results now. Very interesting and very, very enlightening response. I would say that 90% of you feel that strategic sourcing category management is important. Very astonishing, Suresh. This is a very interesting thing. And I will actually jump straight on to the questions, if you don't mind. I think we have just about 8 minutes left. So I will jump to the questions, and we have a whole bunch of questions which have come across from the audience. The first question is from Andrew. And I think you have heard this question. I have heard this question many times as well. We already have an ERP system. How can we, get additional benefits? What is the exact need for implementing an exclusive procurement and sourcing solution?
Correct. Kumar, I think we have been hearing this quite often, right? Because if you look at it, most of the ERP systems and strategic sourcing is not something which is part and parcel of it. It is basically to cover the end-to-end standard processes without having focus on any specific areas. You hardly find an ERP system where there is a focus in terms of saving management as well as spend management, right? Spend management to some extent may be there. Category management is a huge missing component in that, and savings analysis is more a completely missing component, right? In most of the systems, this is a wide space when it comes to that. The supplier onboarding process, right? The entire supplier lifecycle management, simple things like actually, as and when there is a change occurs, how easy for us to manage that. And there are a lot of challenges when it comes to the regulations are getting changed, and the process in terms of compliance is getting changed. So you always have a challenge in terms of managing that in an ERP system. And many of the ERP systems are complex and not really helping people to manage such scenarios, right? And the deployment cycle itself takes longer, and people start losing interest, and people don't get the best out of it actually. And the real challenge in the procurement, which is the strategic sourcing, strategic procurement, which is more related, kind of more complex, which is not managed in the ERP system, right? That is why people are looking at a system which is more tailored for managing such unique challenges what procurement has got today, and they will get the best value out of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. The next question is from Paul. We are a group of companies working in different areas or different commodity and material areas. How can digitization help us?
See, digitization can help you in many ways, right? As I said, consolidation of demand is going to really help you through digitization. It is going to help you to get better price using economy of scale as a theory in terms of negotiating with the supplier with a larger volume, and you get a better price. Digitization can help you in terms of working from home kind of a concept, right? The remote working, you need to have a single tool which helps everybody to collaborate and work. Digitization can help you in terms of automating many repeated tasks. Automation, digitization can help you in terms of leveraging technology like artificial intelligence in terms of predicting risks and statistics and all other kind of things. Actually, digitization can help you throughout your procurement process to make it more effective and efficient.
Yep, absolutely. And of course, consolidation of demand is close to impossible if you are on Excel sheets across, with different part numbers and so on. It's almost like unthinkable, right, in a manual process.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The one question is around, security and risk when we are digitizing, will my data be secure? I think this question gets asked many times. So this question is from Felix. He wants to know, how can we handle the risk associated with sharing information virtually?
Actually, there is no information being shared, right? It is at the end of the day, the solution is completely secure, right? And data is completely encrypted, and people cannot misuse the data, right? And at the end of the day, there are different regional data centers. The data is going to reside in that region itself, actually, right? And it's completely secured to that particular environment, right? So it is not something which people can use it, and solutions are completely security certified.
Absolutely, yeah. And can you give some examples? This question is from Tobias. Can you give some examples of analytics which are specifically relevant to direct procurement or direct sourcing, and various aspects of analytics in direct procurement?
Yeah, see, as I said, the analytics are covering the end-to-end functions, right? If you look at it, the BOM analytics, that is more to do with different stages of the product development. Actually, what is the cost and how we manage to bring down the cost from X to X minus 1 or X minus 2, right? And who are all up, where part of that particular team is also something we can look at it. We can look at actually the buyer-wise performance in terms of which buyer was managed to get better savings throughout the process. We can see which category has performed better, right? And what has contributed to the overall savings, right? There are several statistics, analytics available actually in the system directly related to the direct procurement itself, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The next question is from Siddiq. He has asked, are there any ways in which we can help improve cash flow and enhance optimization of the cash we consume using a tool?
There are different techniques. As I said, if you can have a better on-time delivery from your suppliers, right? And that can be achieved through strategic sourcing and proper tools by having expediting functions and so on and so forth. That will help us to reduce the inventory buffer, right? And you don't have to have much of safety stock and all other kind of things. As much as you can stick to the just-in-time, that is definitely going to help you in terms of releasing a lot of reserve cash, right? Which is more of the working capital can be brought down, right? Number two, one of the interesting things what one of my customers have done during this pandemic, where most of their suppliers started asking the customer to reduce the payment term, right, from 90 days to 60 days. It used to take a hell lot of a time from the customer. They used to say, hey, 100 customers asked me to reduce the payment term. There is no easy way for me to calculate. I know that actually, yeah, it is going to cost me money, right? But how much? How do I know the impact actually? How easy for me to calculate that was the biggest question, biggest challenge he had. But The tool, what we have given, which is Merlin, there is a payment term impact calculation. The moment somebody is requesting for something, system look at the overall turnover of that particular supplier and the future commitments, and based on which it gives you the impact, based on which people can take a very conscious decision, right? And that will really help you in terms of making your cash flow better.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I know, very interesting. Even I when you were telling me about this, I found it pretty interesting. Yeah. We have time only for one more question, unfortunately, Suresh. So I will just pick up just one out of them. How can I? Yeah, I think you kind of answered this, so maybe it could be a very short reply. How can I actually identify risk in my supply chain using a digital solution?
Now, as I said earlier, Kumar, there are tools associated with it. You can use AI as a tool for identifying risk. There are many other performance analytics, actually, supplier performance and category performance, and so on and so forth, which will help you to identify the potential risk, and you can make it part of the risk register. You can have a response strategy to the risk, actually, in terms of either avoid, mitigate, or accept, right? So whatever it could be. So yep, there are different way of managing that, actually.
Absolutely. I think we are bang on time, and I have everything covered. All the questions that I got from the audience have also been covered. So we are good for the day. And thank you so much. You've been a very great audience. Thanks for a lot of interaction. I think it's been a fantastic session, Suresh. Thank you so much. I look forward to meeting up with you and catching up with you once again in the very near future.
Thanks, Kumar. Thanks to all of you who has attended this session. Actually, it's wonderful talking to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye.